the fact that his closest supporters, those that are against the West in many ways, are even saying this isn't good. He needs to listen to that. And of course, it's not good for them as well. I mean, we know that the spillover effect from this war is not just tragic for Ukrainians, but it's also impacting the entire globe.
United Nations investigators say Russia has committed war crimes in Ukraine, including numerous executions, torture and sexual violence. Today, people living in 4 occupied regions of the country are voting in referendums on whether they want to become part of Russia. The referendums have been organised by Russia, and the US President Joe Biden is among those calling them a sham. Let's speak to Dr. Karin von Hippel, who is Director General of the Royal United Services Institute. Good morning.
Good morning.
First of all, let's talk about these referendums, because there are potentially huge implications for what is happening if, as we expect will be the case, Russia will decide that these regions have voted to become part of Russia. Then if there are attacks from the Ukraine or the West, Putin can say, look, they're attacking Russia.
Yeah, but only Putin can say that. Not one country will recognize that. I don't know if you were listening at the UN General Assembly earlier in the week. If your listeners were, but even Erdogan of Turkey was saying that all parts of Ukraine should be restored to Ukraine, essentially. So I think he would get very little support at the global level. So I'm not entirely sure what that means. I mean, he could essentially say that now. So, and he hasn't said that now.
I guess the danger, I was just going to say, I guess the danger is President Putin has this week said if anyone attacks Russian territory, we may respond with a nuclear weapon. That's the backdrop.
Yeah, I mean, he's made those oblique references or very overt references throughout the conflict, and we don't really know what his red line is, actually, because as we've all seen, the weapons have gone from only defensive in nature to a wide variety of weapons, many of which are offensive. We've seen different countries offer support in many different ways, and none of that has been a red line. And I don't think he fully understands what his red line is. But by the way, I'm not sure all of us supporting countries know what the red line is for the types of weapon. I mean, occasionally you'll hear President Biden say, we're not going to provide that particular weapon system because that is too offensive in nature. It can go too far. It can cause too much damage inside the country. But it's pretty rare that we hear that. So, I don't know what to make of it, actually. I think that he knows that if he used even a tactical nuclear weapon, that he would lose even the support of his closest friends, that's China and India. So I think he does realize that. And he's already getting pushback. I mean, for me, the most interesting thing was this week, again, at the UN General Assembly, and last week at the Shanghai Cooperation Conference, when India and China pushed back last week, and Putin publicly admitted that. I mean, India, we heard Modi say, now is not the time for war. And then at UNGA earlier this week, when Erdogan as well jumped on that bandwagon. So I think the fact that his closest supporters, those that are against the West in many ways, are even saying this isn't good. He needs to listen to that. And of course, it's not good for them as well. I mean, we know that the spillover effect from this war is not just tragic for Ukrainians, but it's also impacting the entire globe.
Let's talk about the UN General Assembly, because many people are asking, I mean, why on earth is Russia still on the UN? The UN doesn't have teeth. Is it even worth meeting?
Well, that's a good question. And many of us who have been fans of the UN for many years have been incredibly frustrated by it, not just now, but for years. I mean, don't forget when the Syrian civil war was happening, the UN Security Council could not even approve a resolution dealing with humanitarian assistance only. So the UN Security Council is totally incapable of doing anything because you have 2 countries, Russia and China, that can veto or abstain from any resolution. But there are other parts of the UN. The UN is much more than the Security Council. So politically, yes, it's incapable. General Assembly has done more, and even this week, by organizing this big event, it has the option and the possibility to do more, even though many people think it's just a gab fest. And then there's, the WHO and the Food Program and, all of those UN organizations. So the UN is much more than the Security Council. But yes, it should be doing much more than it's doing right now.
We know that war crimes investigators have been in Ukraine for some time, and we also know now that the UN Commission is saying that war crimes have been committed in Ukraine. They have evidence of that. How significant is that for the UN to say, when many people have suspected it, but to actually have that evidence?
Yeah, I think it's important. I mean, typically when organizations investigate war crimes, those perpetuating them are not brought to justice right away, but they are later. And we've seen that many times. So it's important to be documenting this stuff incredibly carefully. It's important to have it ready to go when it's time to take people to trial. And we've seen that so many times, whether it's with Bosnia or in Rwanda or elsewhere. I mean, there are many organizations that have been documenting war crimes in Syria, and even countries such as Germany that have been prosecuting Syrians in their own countries for committing war crimes. So all of this is important. It needs to be documented in an incredibly careful and systematic way. And those who do that understand this. So yeah, that's another important role the UN can play. I mean, don't forget, even if you think about the Chinese treatment of the Uyghurs and that one human rights report that came out, they actually decried human rights in that area much more than people thought they might. So they did show some teeth. Perhaps they didn't go as far as many in the human rights community wanted them to, but they didn't just whitewash the entire thing either.
Mm. You sounded, when we were talking about the threat from Vladimir Putin of using nuclear weapons, you seemed quite relaxed. There have been people this week who've seemed very worried about this. And it's kind of calming that you don't see it as that much of a threat.
Look, none of us know, right? I mean, I just would like to think that as, he's made so many blunders. I mean, the invasion of Ukraine was a huge blunder for him personally, and for Russia as well as for obviously Ukraine and the rest of the world. But I just don't think he would do that. I don't know. And I can imagine that the people around him are concerned as well. And I can imagine that President Xi Jinping of China is the one probably who has the best chance of persuading him to do stuff. And so I would hope that behind the scenes that these conversations are happening. But, you never know. It could be bluster. It could be real. But it's just so hard for me to fathom that. That's why, I guess. And I guess I'm an optimist by nature. But it doesn't mean I'm right. I've been wrong plenty of times.
Thank you ever so much for speaking to us. Really grateful for your time. That is Dr. Karin von Hippel, who is Director General of the Royal United Services Institute. Let's hope she's right on this one.
Yeah, exactly.